So welcome all the participants to the third session of the day. So our speaker for this session has joined already. So we'll start the session in 2 minutes. So let some more participants join. Okay, so we can start now. So first I will formally introduce. There is echo coming. Yes. So first I will start formally the biography of our speaker. So Dr. Sunil Jaiswal is currently the head of R&D department in K-Lens GmbH, a 3D camera-based company. He also co-supervised master thesis students from Max Planck Institute of Informatics, Germany. He received PhD from Hong Kong University of Technology and Science and Technology in 2017 and BTech from Mellon IIT India in 2012 respectively. During his PhD, he used to be a visiting scholar in Technicolor R&D France in 2017 and Stony Brook University USA and Sony Korea in 2015-16. He is a recipient of the Best Research and Innovation Award 2017 from Technicolor R&D. He is also a recipient of SAN PhD Fellowship from HKUST in 2016. He also received Best Paper Award in I2MTC 2011. He was the co-organizer of Smart Imaging Workshop in ICME 2020. Dr. Jaiswal's research interests include 3D vision and medical imaging. So now I welcome our speaker for this session, Dr. Sunil Jaiswal. So welcome, Dr. Sunil, for this
Sir,
session.
we are getting some echo from your side.
Yeah, I am also feeling some echo is coming. Okay, let me just complete it. So I will hand over the session to Dr. Sunil.
So thank you, Dr. Sutija, and I think thanks for the nice introduction. I hope my voice I'm audible to you guys. Am I audible?
Yes, your voice is coming fine.
Am I audible to you guys? Can you please comment? I'll just. Okay, great. So maybe I start my video as, or how should I do?
You can share your screen.
Mm-hmm.
Let
Yeah.
me assign you the. Yeah, now you will be able to share the screen.
Okay, great. I think it's a good when just a background of what has happened in the last few weeks when Dr. Sadija called me and told about this initiative that we are trying. He's trying to have researchers and professors from different places, and all of them will share their opinions, especially on AI, signal processing, and AI healthcare. And I think after working for three and a half years in the industry, what I have realized that although AI or deep learning, you hear it everywhere. It's like a buzzword these days for researchers. But I think even for AI, there will be some cases or scenes where it will not work, and you have to have a solution for that. And I think this is where signal processing still plays a handy role. And my today's talk, what I thought I'll keep it on a similar background. I'll be able to share my screen now. So you have to tell me when you see my screen. Are you able to see my screen now?
Yeah, it's coming fine.
Great. And you can see my slide as well right now.
Yes.
Yeah, great. Yeah, so I thought I'll make a presentation where I personally believe both signal processing and deep learning uh, techniques needs to go hand by hand in order to address the problem, especially in industry. What I realized is that there will be some scenes where deep learning outperforms, other state-of-the-art algorithms or state-of-the-art signal processing algorithms. But there are some cases where the client still would like to see a best where, for example, if you put an image on a rainy scenes or say in the dark in the night, and if the deep learning algorithm is not trained on those data sets, then I think most likely it will fail. And that's where I think with the signal processing based algorithm, you have control on fine tuning the parameters so that it works for that particular image, and that's why I think, they're both important even in today's time. Okay, so I'll just start my presentation. So, good afternoon, everyone. As Dr. Satish already mentioned, my background, I am Sunil Jaswal and currently leading the research and development team at Kelens. I'll briefly tell you about what Kelens is about. So, we are based in Germany right now, and it's an startup company that was derived from Max Planck Institute in Germany, Max Planck Institute of Informatics in Germany, around 6-7 years back. And on a high level, we are a hardware-based company. So it's a 3D based company. On top of that, we also provide sort of algorithm software that is needed in order to use that hardware. And we work on diverse topics since it's a 3D based company, so we work on all 3D vision related topics or image processing, as well as we also work on medical imaging topics. With Kalens, the advantage is that we captures multiple perspective of one shot, and in medical imaging it helps us to increase the number of images in the data sets training a deep learning algorithm. And that's why we try to address some of the medical imaging problem. In this presentation, I'll mainly talk about two topics, one on CT image. Uh, so it's on CT imaging. There are two subtopics: low dose computed tomography and a metal artifact reduction. I'll give a brief intro first, and then I'll dive into each of the topic in some details. Due to some NDA, which is non-disclosure agreement signed by me and a third party, I'll only be able to really reveal some of the information metal artifact reduction. But the amount of information we get in low dose CT will help you to get an idea of what we are trying to address in metal artifact problem statement. And then, of course, we'll have a conclusion and work session after that. So, first thing first, let's go to CT imaging. So, I think we all know about what is CT imaging, especially in the Corona time. I think, unfortunately, more of our family members, relative or cousins, they might have gone through CT imaging in order to check the Corona infection and so on. And this is something not where we all are comfortable with, but yeah, that's harsh reality, and we have to go through the CT imaging. So how it works is that the big CT scan machine, you will see it in a hospital, big hospital, and the patient needs to lie on a bed, and there's can you see my mouse pointer?
Yes, it's coming.
Yeah, okay, great. So there is a circular tube which is actually used for X-ray thing, and it is used to create a detailed scan of wherever you want, like from lungs to anywhere. The way it works is that there is an X-ray tube in one part of the this circular cone, and the X-ray shoots it, and then there's a detector on the on basically backside of and then whatever the X-ray shoots, so the body and the detector needs to detect or deposit all the X-rays. That helps to in order to recreate what is inside your body. So application of CT scan as you know, that it can be used in many different ways. It actually helps detect any abnormal growths or anything that is not clear from X-ray, like the presence of a tumor or anything that before surgery most of the time they go for a CT scan, so the doctors or surgeons, they know exactly what is inside the body and they don't get just when they open the body for surgery. And as I said, the working process of a CT scan is that patient lies on a table and X-ray source rotates. There are two phases. One is called projection. Projection means the X-ray detector will detect or collect the samples from several projection images. So it will at each angle, and really X-ray detector, X-ray plate will also rotate synchronously. And then there is a projection stage where once you collected all the samples, you back project it using some algorithm, and this helps to create a 3D volume of what is inside the body. Something called full dose CT reconstruction in computer tomography imaging. So what is full dose computer tomography? So on a high level, there is an X-ray tube here, and there are some detectors which are collecting X-ray samples, and this will move at each angle. Okay, so which actually this is something referred as full dose, and once it moves at angles, there's something called projection. So it will collect all the samples, and this is basically a sinogram domain. I'm not sure if you know about how this sinogram is plotted. Basically, it's basically based on Fourier transform or an extension of Fourier transform. And once you have the projection image of sample, you can project it in order to get a CT scan of that organ that you are scanning. In this, it's the lungs. You can see that and other important anatomical structure. But the problem with any full dose scan, you might have heard that generally they do CT scan once in 6 months. It's not to have CT scan very frequently because it increases the risk of cancer. And is that the radiation is very high as compared to a normal X-ray. And now that's why the researchers have tried to explore why don't we try to address it using some signal processing or algorithms, and where we don't shoot all the X-rays at each instance. Instead, we shoot it, like for example, say only 20 instances. So in 360 degrees, we only shoot it for 20 times, and we will do some sort of interpolation in between them. So this is something we done because we have a very strong signal processing background. And so once it's done, you'll again have a projection image, but that projection will not be as continuous as it was previously. So if you look it backward, although you can't get here from, but so they'll have some sort of a problem on projection image. And this is expected because you are not shooting all the X-rays at each angle. And once, oh, okay, sorry. So this is the, so if someone does say 1/4 of X-ray shooting, then this what capture it instead of full scale projection image. The problem occurs when you do back projections. So it's limited in energy. When you do back projection, it will have artifacts on the CT scan image. And this work, it is then that's why the people have started exploring different signal processing or different algorithms to reduce this artifact. So in one way, you can also say that this becomes a denoising problem. Some people model it different ways. Some people model it, in a denoising sense. But the advantage here is you are getting 1/4. If you are using 1/4 of projection, then you're just using 1/4 what a full CT scan goes. So there was an interesting project that I did it with a professor doing my PhD in Stony Brook University. So what we wanted to create our own robotic-based CT. So as I explained here that traditional CT scan, the patient needs to lie on a table, right? And so this limits, the flexibility for the patient. So we thought, why don't we do something like say a patient is just sitting on a chair and you still want to do a CT scan. So the way, although because of NDA that I have signed, I'm not allowed to post picture of X-ray tube. So this is a different camera. So there was an X tube here, and this is not a detector. So there was an X-ray detector as well. And we had two big robots with us, where at one we mounted the X-ray tube, and at other we have the detector, and the patient can lie, say, it's just sitting on a chair, and there's two robots on a side by side. And what we can do, we can control the robot motions from a room where with a transparent glass, because you're not allowed to get exposed to the X-ray as it is harmful. And then and the problem of low dose also comes there, because you can't move a robot to a 360 degree, right? When a patient is on a table, you can do that with a circular ring, but with a robot, you can't move it on a 360 degree. So again, the problem comes if we shoot only say 180 degree, how can we do interpolation for other 180 degree? Or if we shoot say half of projection image, then we'll have some artifacts, and we address that artifacts. And the next problem statement is metal artifacts. It's quite similar to almost similar to low dose CT artifacts to some sense. So this is an ideal phantom. This is a synthesized image, not an real lung image that you saw previously. So this is a 2D phantom. As I said earlier, there is a projection, so where you project, where you can a projection algorithm to get a projection image, which is called a sinogram. And once you do a back projection, then reconstructed image. So since the sinogram is not projected, you get a perfect reconstructed image. Now let's imagine a case where someone has gone through a surgery where small metal tube or some metal is inserted in the surgery while the surgery was happening. And because of that metal, when X-ray falls on those body parts, in the projection domain, there will be some artifacts. What you see here, so basically they are sinus nature, and with projection algorithm, one can easily relate why such artifacts. These are something they refer as metal traces in literature. Now the problem comes, what happened when you do back projection. So when you do projection, what you're going to see the metal, of course, right, because of the traces, but you also see those artifacts, which is not good for assessment from surgeon point of view. And artifacts, you see it here, and that you saw it in low dose cases. Although they are different, they can be modeled on the same. Now I'll jump into little details about the low dose CT artifact reduction. So what the problems for the algorithm that I'm going to explain here was being used for our project used in robotic based CT. A part of that was used in robotic based CT because we are not allowed to publicly publish it all the algorithms. But this will give you a good idea about what are the literature stand on this topic, and how to combine both signal processing and deep learning for this particular problem. Goal here is that we have a low dose CT scan image. Now we want to restore a normal dose CT. So how do we go from here to here? As I said, this can be modeled as an image problem, from denoising or deblurring. And so this actually opens a scope of a lot of algorithms that can be used from signal processing to medical imaging. There are a couple of groups that they are trying to address this problem. One such group actually focus on non-local filtering. I think most of us must have used this previously some of the topics, but I'll still give a brief overview how it works. So what it does is that there's an original image you considered as a ground truth, for example, and then each pixel in the artifact image, you try to do a non-local search it do extract a patch around that pixel and then go for a patch looking for a similar patch in neighborhood. And this blue dot is actually a neighborhood. Is something can be defined, like what is the size of that search window. This on image to image, problem to problem. Similarly, what is the size of this patch, red and a white patch. This also depends on the problem to problem. So the way it works is that you try to find patch and then you apply an extension of bilateral filter, and what it actually reduced artifact image, which I refer as non-local means. So although you see the artifacts as reduced, but the details have been lost, and I think this something will not be acceptable to the surgeons. That they lose the details. Otherwise, they'll simply go with the original trend they have, that you do the CT scan every 6 months and get a clear image. And I think the reason behind details has lost because the artifacts are scattered throughout the image now. And then there's another set of algorithms which actually extend patch-based database local means filtering. So they did here that they are trying to similar patch in the artifact. So basically, you're trying to get the best of in the artifact itself, and artifact itself is not the correct source where you like to have the information. So they thought that why don't use from a batch of data sets where the artifacts are clearly there's artifacts. So what they did is like the problem statement remains the same. I have a search window. If they want to say remove the artifacts of this pixel, they'll search for blue pixel, but in this image. So what they did, they created a database which they cover it as offline phase. And the advantage here is that in human bodies, these anatomical structures are more or less said that they are not exact, they can't be exact, but you can figure out like what are the lungs. Sometimes the lungs will be larger, sometimes it will have smaller, but more it will follow some set of similar trend. So what they did is like they divided this database. So I took 5 images as an example, but there are a lot of images in the data set. What they did is that they simply extracted patches and make it a database of clear and crisp patches. So what they did now is that instead of looking in the same image, they go for looking in other images. Right? Now the problem comes like, how are you going to compare it? This is finally a noisy image and this is a crisp image, but I think this is something better than nothing, right? So there's still some question how they did it, but I think still it's better than how it's better than if you do it on the artifact image. So one can use like L2 norm metric in order to find which is the best match, or one can find say sophisticated algorithm to find the best match from the data set. So this set of method has improved what was from non-local mean filters. So I'll go through this point. So as I said earlier, the information in the input image were not sufficient. And so that's why they decided to extend the search space beyond the image. Utilize database of different patients. Fortunately, this is the case that if a hospital collaborate with some medical researchers, they can those data sets. They are very confidential, but still they are can be shared to some degree. And then they collected them, divided the images into many patches, which they call offline phase, and then uses this artifact patches, which means these patches, to find the similarity in non-local means filtering. And then there is a set of algorithm which actually has found out some important observation. So if you look at from a signal perspective, that is an image, uncorrected image, which uncorrected or artifact image, which comes from low-dose imaging, and you can apply a high frequency based, algorithm to get a high frequency component of this image and a low frequency component of this image. And let's say you have a non-local means filter output from here. So you can do the same high frequency component and a frequency component. As expected, the high frequency component from the artifact image will have a lot of spikes in it, because it will, all the artifacts will have some high frequency component in it. And in non-local means, will, since it has blurred those, the edges will have less artifacts, as well as less detailed anatomical structure, which is not there. So the, some of the groups, what they decided, that why not we integrate these different frequency components. So if you look at these images, if you can, you already have it, but there's some anatomical structure which is actually available on the artifact image. So if we can some filter this one and get the anatomical structure, I think, already in a good direction. And that's what another group, which is they focused on something called frequency shift artifact reduction. So the idea of artifact image has the anatomical structure with the artifacts. So basically what they mean, that they have anatomical structure as well as artifacts. An algorithm such as non-local means they reduce the artifacts but also preserve the frequency of original image. So they actually can get a good amount of frequency, what is needed for the reconstructed image, but they lose the frequency details. Of course, they also have some level of high frequency details. So their idea was, why don't combine the high frequency component, both of them, in a smart way, and we low frequency as it is. So that was their basic idea behind. So if we go in an equation, basically they took a low frequency from a corrected source. Corrected means non-local filter, and a weighted average of high frequency from two different images. So in this case, this is one image and the other image. But there was some limitation in that algorithm, that that algorithm was designed only for a particular region of interest, because the way they estimated weights were allowed them to have weights on a particular region of interest, which means they can only try to remove this part and ignore the other parts, so which is not good for those CT scan, because the artifacts are scattered throughout the image, and also the weights were not obtained optimally. So optimally means in an optimized sense. So what we did is that we wanted to focus on all parts of image, and we also wanted to use the weights in an optimal sense. We also tried that if you look at the equation, they only focused on high frequency component, because they assume that the low frequency component has already been restored what's needed for the reconstructed image. So why not also optimize the low frequency component? And this was the basic foundation of research. So I'll briefly tell you about what we did it in low-dose CT scan algorithm. And as I said before, I'm not allowed to reveal everything, so still it's good enough to have an idea of what we did it. As I said earlier, so this is the same thing that I just presented to recently, a few slides back. So what we did is that we proposed something optimized high frequency component. This is the same equation that we borrowed from that algorithm. But what we did is that instead of finding those weights local sense, we did simple. So here I'll show you a simple L2 norm optimization, but we did something else, something more on top of that. So one can simply do a L2 norm optimization, right? So you simply formulate it, write a distortion equation, do an expect minimization, and then constant you have that the weight should be range of 0 to 1. It could go negative as well, I think, in real sense, but yeah, I mean, a simple mathematical sense, the weights between 0 to 1, and then of course you want it that it improves the overall results, right? So quite simple, do a differentiation and an equation finally. But the problem here is that how to calculate this number, right? The distortion of basically error of this, and for that you need some sort of ground truth in order to compute those weights. So if you derive those equations, W1H and W2H, W1H has something called D, which is distortion obtained by the corrected image or null means filtering image. And in order to have distortion, you need to have a ground truth. So basically, we are again stuck here how to address a ground truth problem. But as I said earlier, in one of the algorithms, we used a database of clean prior images, artifact-free patches. So we thought, why don't we extract the ground from those patches. So the way we do it is like we also have same database that the other groups have, like of other patients, and these images are publicly available, so you can have a look if you are interested on that. And we also divided those images into small patches, and in order to estimate this decore, which is the distortion of non-local means filter, you uses these images as a prior algorithm. So how it works is that what we did, there's an offline, so we divided them into patches. There's an uncorrected. The goal here is to have a better construction than non-local means filter or other state of the algorithm. We apply simple local means filter algorithm to have a corrected image. This goes to a linear combination, right? So linear combination of uncorrected image and corrected image. So this goes to this input, and now in order to estimate the weights, this weight, we need to have some more information, right? What we did is like for each patches, we try to find a best match in the database, and we assume that the best is actually kind of replicate what is needed for the reconstructed image. It can't be 100% perfect. Finally, we are looking at other patients' database, but I think it's still good enough for an algorithm to make an assumption, such assumption. And we use that patch as a prior in order to estimate the weight. Okay, so for each target page to be denoised, we has the target patch with the regular dose images. The best similar patch is used to estimate estimate of f, and this estimate the optimal. As a here, we also decided to optimize the low frequency components. So on the top is a optimized high frequency components. Let's assume we already have the weight from that database. Now we thought, why not we also optimize, do a similar linear combination of low frequency weights. So basically this follows the same approach as we did it for the case. Now, once we obtained an optimized low frequencies and optimized high frequency, we know that they can be added. So we add them in order to have the result of having an individual optimization. So there's some visual results, to give an idea about how much improvement has been done from traditional algorithms. So what you see here is the ground truth. A portion of that has been highlighted. These are uncorrected low dose artifacts, and the bottom is actually a high frequency component. So is not an high frequency, it's an error image weighted ground truth and artifact image, or ground truth or reconstructed image. So as expected, uncorrected image will have a lot of artifacts. Non-local means since it blurs the important edges, so but still there are artifacts around it. And the proposed case, you can see that the reconstruction was better than non-local means filter, and the errors are also quite low as compared to other approaches. And then we also decided to extend this algorithm. So again, I'll just give you a label on this. So I think if you ask me how to estimate this, there can be 1,000 ways in order to do that. And if you just from a student point of view, if I'm a student again, if I'm interested in this topic, I think you can just good weighting scheme, do some good optimization, and you get a better improved result than what I presented here using this simple L2 nomenclature, which is very best, I think. Now we thought, since we have a pool of information, like we still have exploited this database, right? So we thought, why not we also have another term which we it as a prior term. So what is this prior term actually? As you know, we have an offline phase. We know we still have these images with us, and we're using it for weight estimation, but we are not using it in explicitly or directly, compute the optimized components. So we thought, let's do one thing. Let's use that component in the equation. So the way it works for each page in page, you have a corrected image. So basically the frequency comes from here, high frequency comes from here and here, and we also wanted a high frequency to come from here. The advantage it will have that it's artifact free, so there's no noise in it, and you can have artifact a real high frequency. But the problem will be of misalignment of edges, and this something needs to be controlled with weights. Since misalignment is there, so one has to do registration, and this what we did actually in our project, but I'll not explain here. It's quite obvious that a basic registration is needed. So you have to find some sort of homography, for example, and they say homography or some sort, feature points, and then try to them before you them. Yeah. So the way it works in high level is that you have offline data sets, offline database, and for each uncorrected image, there's a corrected image. Previously, only these two images were going into the optimization framework. Now, since we have a third component, so we use one component from here. But remember, we also need one component in order to estimate the weights, right? Because the weight estimation still requires in order to compute the distortion. But if we patch from here, then how are we going to use the next patch? So what we decided that let's calculate two base patch here. The best will be used for weight computation, and the second actually goes to for the linear computation. And once for high frequency component, once it's optimized for high frequency component, we can do a similar thing for a frequency optimization, which means that we'll have low frequency from three places now, from here, and from here. And once you have an optimized high frequency and low frequency, then I think one can simply add them and, or do some manipulation in order to get a better reconstruction. I have to give a summary. The summary is quite simple. So what we did is that we tried to in high frequency component of both corrected and uncorrected image. Similarly, we did it frequency components. For in the method 2, what we did is that we included a artifact-free prior in the optimization framework. Okay, so usually how it looks like. So on a high level, again, this corrected image, you apply some on it, split images into two components: high frequency, low frequency, high frequency, low frequency. You first optimize the high frequency. Similarly, you optimize the low frequency. The missing here, I think, yeah. And then once you have an optimized high frequency, you can add them. I think there's figures again, so maybe this can help you to see the advantage of having each component and then what it gives you at the end. So optimized high frequency is much better than regional and non-local means output. I think the optimized low frequency, as expected, it has blurred the images, but that's what we are trying to achieve from. And then once you add, you get the best of both worlds. So I'll tell you some simulation result now. Okay, so result of method 1. So what you see on the top row is, I think this is the truth or gold standard. This is zoomed version of this region. These are the artifact image. This is the error image. This is the corrected, which means it comes from local mean filtered. Result of method 1, basically after adding both optimized high frequency, this is what you get. And individual components. So prior integrated optimized frequency, prior integrated optimized low frequency, and when you add them, you this one. So if I look at the result, they are definitely better than method 1, and I think overall this is much better than similar to this one, but I think it's still better in some sense. It's still better than this one. Also did some quality assessment, objective quality assessment, just to have a number. And since we have the ground, also one can do a lot of quality assessment. We used MSc analysis of different methods. So you see, what is important here is that this number. So what you see, so lower the better. So lower means better reconstruction, and what you see here is that it's consistent over different regions of interest. So the region of interest, and in all of them, they were much better than. Some more visuals. I think it's zoomed now. So yeah, so it's definitely proposed method is better than rest of them, and also it has less artifacts, less error in the image. A nice paper on, if you are interested on this topic, you read this paper itself, it will give you a good overview of what is happening in this topic, but it's 2013. So did some comparison with other methods, although it was not needed for a project from publication point of view. It's quite important to have those comparison. And I think IIR stands for, it's an iterative reconstruction algorithm. As you know, once you have those equations, you can have 1,000 ways in order to optimize that weights. And this something still can be explored if someone is interested in this topic. So IIR is iterative. So they try to optimize those weights in an iterative sense, so they start from some weights and then go, but they are computationally quite expensive. This is non-local means filter. There's some more visual results. So this is proposed method 1, proposed method 2, and there are different chemical structures. So you can see that even the slide, they are captured. You also see the advantage of using this higher database in the equation term. It makes the artifacts much clearer than the proposed method itself. And then there's some other results which actually tell the same, that they are better than as we expected. Okay, so right now, if you look at how deep learning works, like we still have not. I'll say we still have not smartly organized the weights. If I look at what we have done in the past, that we simply use as 2 weights, and those weights are scalar, which means for each page they'll remain same, no matter chemical structure changes or not. So the question is, can we do better? I think one way would be to optimize those weights in an iterative sense, or formulate it in a different way. And then there was a boom of deep learning in 2015-16. This when I was doing research on this topic, and we thought, why not we use deep learning? But the problem is how it differs, how we addressed previously, and how we are going to address it in a deep learning. So I'll just give you a brief overview of what is the difference. Previously means previous algorithm, that we have x is nothing but I wrote it in a vector form. So x nothing both high frequency component, and y is nothing but the optimized output. And we have weights which is in vector form, so we do simply a linear combination here. And now if we try to optimize or try to find this weight using a neural network, how are we going to do that? I think most of you are familiar with how neural network works, but I'll still give you a brief overview on this topic. So the way it works, that it can have multiple weights, and what makes it from or different from here is that there's non-linearity at each node. So each node computes some information from here, and they apply some non-linearity, and then the other nodes capture from the layers, and so on. It goes to output y. So the best part is that you don't have to deal with, this. I think I mentioned it somewhere there in the back side. And the best part, what I liked about the deep learning approach in this case was that for each page we need to do, even our system needs to do in order to have this prior, we need to, for each page we need to find the best one. And just imagine if you have 1,000 patches in the image, you have to do it 1,000 times, which is very expensive. So professionally, it was not realistic at all. And where I think deep learning is address that we'll have those weights based on the neural network itself. What to take care of is that how to the ground truth, and this is something everyone has to do it in when using deep learning. So the basic idea that what we need to learn from deep learning is that learn the high frequency component, because we assume that we have a correct low frequency component, which means we have to learn a detailed architecture or detailed structure. And that's why we decided, so first we started with a smaller CNN, but later on we found that it's not doing that what we expected. So we decided to have a deeper CNN architecture for that. And the result is that it increases the receptive field size. The number non-linearity also increases. Of course, there are the advantages that you get with. So as you know, in neural network, there is something called flow and backward flow. In forward flow, there are some inputs, and each node tries to capture some information of the input in a non-linear sense. And basically, the data from input to output. Once it predicts something, there will be a ground truth information with that. It tries to minimize that ground truth or that error. Then it ideally define the weights that is being used for computing forward flow, and then done in a better gradient flow. But the problem here is that since we increases the number of, the problem that we faced was that it was not converging. There was a lot of there's something called vanishing gradient, and it was quite new that time, 15, 16. And a lot of people were working on trying to address this problem. But now I think vanishing, you don't see this problem so often these days. And so what it does is that the solution that proposes that you normalize initial weights. One can do batch normalization, use some appropriate activation function. And also the problem was that when the network was increasing, the accuracy was getting saturated, which means there is no increase in the accuracy level, and also the training error was decreasing, which is not good actually. And this when I think this paper came into picture, but as a residual neural network, I think is something is common, and almost everyone knows about this architecture. So what it does is that it actually, so this is an equal CNN case where there's an input X, there are a lot of weight layers, and ReLU, you get some output, right? And you try to optimize output, ground truth number, and then you refine those weights. That's how normally done. But what it tries to do here is that instead, so the hypothesis was it is easier to optimize the residual mapping than optimize the original image, which means that instead of optimizing h of, we can easily learn h of x. So what you input x, this prior, this is available. Why don't we provide the output as? And this actually was a breakthrough, I would say, in the last that time around 2016-17, that it was able to solve most of the problems that we had actually because of vanishing gradient and increasing the size. And this paper was also one of the best paper in CVPR 2016 that time. Okay, so what we did actually. So how to model deep learning framework? One way would be that we the neural network to decide whether they want to extract the low frequency from non-local mean algorithm, or we just in artifact image and we output a new reduced artifact image. What I thought, maybe it's to asking to from a neural network. Instead we should try to do amalgamation of signal processing in deep learning, we should use this framework, and instead of finding the whole output, we should just let neural network to learn these two weights actually. So what does that mean? That we'll input these two components in X form, say, by some sort of overlapping on concurrent region, and the output will be that into basically the output will be a weighted combination. Now, whether this weight comes from how they compute it, it's not our problem. Not deep learning has to do it. But in the training phase, we computed both high frequency term images, and then we input that to instead of inputting the full image. And a rigorous training is done with a lot of images and so on. Our training was successful, and then once we have those parameters, we applied it to the above equations in order to solve that. One thing that I would like to tell you about how we got the ground truth, because this data is publicly available, and so the question is, how can we get it from ground truth to uncorrected image, right? Because we need a corresponding uncorrected image of ground truth. So the way it works, you can write an equation or you can write a script that actually can bring this ground truth to uncorrected image. So in the starting of presentation, I was telling you about this deprojection. You can write an equation which actually get a projection image. If you want, you can also get photo projection image, and if you back project, you get this wrong image. And since you have both corrected, you came from here and then here, so you have a one-to-one correspondence for both of them. And this can help you to generate a data set where you have an artifact image and truth image. Yeah. So so that's we did it, and after that, I think that was one of the initial paper that has used deep learning and this assumption in order to address this problem. But now, when I see the research, there are a lot of papers that are using deep learning already from scratch. They are not using any such assumption. So the advantage we had from the proposed method 2, on which I presented earlier, is that the proposed method 2 and deep learning, they are almost similar. So if you look at the result, they are almost similar. Maybe in the error image you can see some improvement, but the advantage we had is that it's real time. So we don't have to do any exhaustive patch for each patches in the image. And that was actually quite helpful, especially for our project that was robotic based CT scan. So you can't wait too long, in order to and they're expensive as well. Even in this one, I think proposed method 1 and DL based CT is proposed method 2, or maybe it's error. But yeah, I think more or less our finding was that the DL algorithm was similar to proposed method 2, but the advantage was to use DL based because of complexity, less complexity. Okay, so the last topic is about artifact detection. How it works, I think I explained you a little earlier that when there is a metal tube inserted image, the way it works is that you can have some metals, and then once the projection is done, you can have artifacts, which is referred as metal traces. Now, back projection is you can have you get the artifact image. Now, this artifact image is a little different from what the artifact image was in low dose CT images, but I think this can be modeled as the same problem. Now, one sort of algorithm can be that why don't we fix this artifact itself? That we apply an interpolation on those metal traces since you have a prior information, where are the problems, so you can actually do some sort of interpolation at all those points. And if you reproject it, you get let's call it imprinting based algorithm. If you reproject it, then you basically reduces the artifacts, but there's some other artifacts. I don't know if you look at it, but there's some black shadows, which is not expected again. And I think one can do all sort of research that I have presented you earlier, that there's an ideal phantom and an artifact image. Let's call this in-painting based algorithm as uh, LI, linear interpolation based metal artifact reduction. And so which actually will details. And if you want, we can use a similar frequency split algorithm. So some of the group have applied non-local means filtering, some of them have applied frequency split algorithm on this topic. And that's how, but still some problems again. So as I said earlier, that group was only on these regions. They don't care about what is in here, which is not good, I think. But you can see a clear artifacts even with that problem state. So again, is the limitation of the existing frequency split region is that they works around metal region, and it's inverted average to high frequency component. Again, basically they high frequency from a corrected image, high frequency of artifact image, and then they try to add hoc to a linear combination of these two components. What we can do is, like, we can follow a same approach. We did it for low dose CT, and we actually did that approach itself, but in slightly different. So we optimize these weights in sense or L1 sense or in another optimization way, and this will actually improve. So that's how the result looks like to frequency split algorithm. So what else we can do? We can follow the process of low dose CT scan. We can optimize frequency components like we did it for case of low dose. We can optimize the low frequency component. We did it for low dose. We can also have included. So actually, we did it this approaches for this particular problem. So we optimized high frequency, low frequency. We had a database where one have all the free patches, and then we also had deep learning based metal artifact reduction, which actually to address. And I think that this where the advantage I see, that both deep learning and signal processing comes into picture. Sometimes I think just having deep based solution is not helpful enough. Then in that case, you need to have some support from signal processing assumption, and that's what the foundation of this research was carried out. I would also like to show you one paper. Yeah, so I can first conclude it, and if this question mark, then we discuss that. Okay, so we discussed two image CT scan problems. One is CT artifact reduction and artifact reduction. We proposed a framework where we first take a frequency domain analysis, understand the fundamental aspect of the problem. So basically, we try to split images into different components and see where the problem lies, and then only proposed, and then only after that we an algorithm that addresses problem. Specifically, we worked on two problems: low-dose CT and metal artifact problems. So what etching method does is that it either blur the image or mainly focus on some component of the image itself, not fully addressing all problems in the images. So what we did, we proposed an optimized frequency split algorithm. First, split the uncorrected image and corrected image into low frequency and high frequency counterparts, and then integrate them optimally to produce artifact reduced reconstructed image. We further reduce artifacts by incorporating a database of artifact free prior images, And then we had a deep learning based solution which kind of fitted hand to hand to this problem. Okay, thank you very much. Do you have questions? Maybe we can discuss that now. I think it was a short presentation, 1 hour.
So participants, do you have any questions? Hello? Echo is coming.
From my side, echo is coming.
From my side. Okay, no problem.
Okay, so there are no questions, right?
Participants, you can ask some questions because we have time left.
Yeah, we have enough time for 1 hour question.
Yes.
So initially I thought I'll explain you more about this metal artifact. It was going in a similar direction, so I thought I'll just give you a brief overview of how we did it. And that's why it was a little shorter.
Yes, participants can interact and ask questions also. Are you also getting echo from my side?
Not, I think your voice is
Yes,
clear
sir.
to me at least.
Yes.
Okay.
Manali, you can ask questions if you have any.
No, sir. I have no questions.
Okay, which deep learning technique did you use in your work?
In our work, actually, we use a variety of deep learning. So we started with simple CNN first, and then what we realized that it's not enough in order to capture or in order to have this reduced art. So we decided to go ahead with larger CNN architecture, and then we had this that what I explained you in gradient, and it was not converging. And then after that, we started ResNet. So finally used ResNet architecture. So we had different variants like 52 layer ResNet, and after that we reduce so that we can have real we can have so that we can discuss. So finally we need to have a running time algorithm. We started with high layer 52 layer, and then we did 21 layer, and then finally it was a trade-off between running time and accuracy.
Okay, so you are working right now in the 3D lens company, right?
So, we are actually working on this 3D imaging company now, and what it does basically. So we have we actually come up with a unique lens, and with a professional photographer, we take a shot of any scene. So what you're going to get, like one shot, you just get one perspective of that image. So you took a shot, and with the same orientation you in image, right? With if you use our lens like K lens, what we call it, you'll get a perspective of the shot in one shot. So you have not a camera, it's real time. You take a shot. When you look at the raw image that you captured, you'll feel like someone has moved the camera to a different position. And once you have this perspective or nine perspective of one scene, You can do a lot of multi-view research here. Example, 3D reconstruction to, for example, photographers are very much interested. Like if say you are standing in front of an Eiffel Tower and they take image, but they realize that they should have on you instead of Eiffel Tower when they took the shot, but focused on Eiffel Tower, not on you. So you can't go back to Eiffel Tower, Paris, and then you do shooting again, right? So there's no processing mechanism in order to address this problem. In this work, K-lens actually plays an important role. If you took the shot with K-lens, since you capture 9 perspective, although you don't know that it captured 9 perspective, right? Because it is done internally. You have the 3D information of all the objects that are standing in front of Eiffel Tower. And once you go back at home, you realize that, oh, I have shoot and I have focused Eiffel Tower. Now, since you have a 3D information, which means you know that exactly how far the objects are standing in front of an Eiffel Tower. So whether they're standing 20 meters from you or from the camera or 30 meters from the camera, you have the depth information. That's what 3D information implies, right? And once you have that 3D information, you can actually see the region you want to focus in processing. So if they want, they can also reduce distance from Eiffel Tower to the object. So they can do some post-processing editing in order to bring the Eiffel Tower to the object or to bring the object to the in front of Eiffel Tower. And this is so our lens is being used by professional photographers and videographers in Germany. The movie makers, for example, they sometimes do a video shoot, but it didn't go the way they expected. The objects are misplaced, or then they can do the post processing if they have used it from K-lens, and they can do all those sort of post processing, editing, say manipulation of objects once they have raw images from K-lens. And that's what we try to do it here. And since we capture 9 information of the same scene, we try to address some medical imaging project. I'm not allowed to tell you exactly what project with medical images. It's related to some sort of blood analysis. For example, you take a blood and you want to examine some particles in the blood. There's diseases where that particle indicates that there's some problem in the blood. Now, what all those big companies does is they look at those images manually, and they have to look at the images manually, and then they say it's right, wrong, and they want an algorithm to do that for them. The problem that they are facing is that they are not allowed to share a lot of images because it comes from diseased people. So that's why they are approaching us that can't we use K-lens for that, and so that we'll have 9 times information. Say they just give us 200 images, so we can have 1800 images from the camera itself, and then if we do manipulation, we can have 4 or 5 times, and that for a deep learning algorithm to do some initial estimate.
So can you discuss on like this aspect, like when we develop an algorithm, how can we go for production or a product? So what are the different stages we have to go through? Like for example, you are fitting this in robotics. So first you have to test on a simple embedded processor, and then you will go for PCB design or whatever the product is. So you can discuss little bit overview, like what are the different stages from the development to the implementation.
I think that's an important question. The way it is like, first we need to understand the problem statement itself. That what is the problem statement itself, and then say you come up with some algorithm that addresses the problem statement. There are a couple of problems that you face during the research and development stage itself, like where it's going to be solvable type of things. For example, take an example. Say you want to do some sort of segmentation. So you took a shot and you want to apply some segmentation on that. Okay. Now that segmentation algorithm will have some problem. On sunny days it works fine, but on rainy days or on foggy days, you'll have a problem because the color contrast has been changed. And so first of all, we need to address the problem that occurs in the R&D, that how can we come up with something that works in all cases. And that's why we use both learning and signal processing. Especially in my team, we use both deep.
Your sound is not coming. You are not audible. No.
Okay. Now?
Yeah, now it's came. Yeah, now it's came.
Okay. So you did it from scratch, or so I can start from scratch what I said. So like the problems that occurs from research to production level, that in the product research level itself many problems. Sometimes a solution, an algorithm works for limited images, not for all sort of images. So we need to fix those. First, we need to fix those problems by incorporating, different set of algorithms like this. We use classical, especially my team, we use classical mathematical modeling and deep learning in order to address a problem. Now, let's say we have a perfect solution algorithm for any problem. Then the problem comes: how do we deploy it, or how do we make it accessible to the public, so that public can a client can use it? Then the question comes about the speed up. How can we do any speed up this algorithm? So this is where most of our effort also goes into that. Once from research development, we are working on speed development. If the end product is a software, then we have to design, and so there's a software team designs UI, that actually makes life easier for the client, that they simply need to press a button and they get what they want. If it's a hardware, which we did it for this CT scan in Stony Brook University, that then the problem was, that once we have this low density algorithm, which was working fine for normal data sets, but since in our case the robot was moving in a strange way, most of the time the extra, when we do, like, at home, we try to switch on lights 10 times, it get fused up because we have overused it. That was actually a problem in our case, that we were so immature in order to those X-ray, and it was quite expensive, that we did more than what we should not do it. It was fused all the time, so we have to order a new one, and that was one of the hardware problem we faced. Once we surpass that problem, then problem comes like, how do we, like the normal hospital, you have a CT scan which actually does all those. Then all this hardware design problem statement comes into picture. That how do we then there was a hardware team who was actually taking our algorithm and trying to, make it as convenient for the client or for the user. And these were the different phases. If it's a hardware, then if end product is a hardware, then I think the problems is that we have to deliver hardware that works for the client. Software, then I think problem becomes more speed up than hardware case.
Okay,
I
so
think
any
I
participants?
Sir,
Do you
can I
have any
ask a
questions?
question? Sir, like you just discussed that like you're deploying deep learning model to hardware. So for that hardware, how can we choose a suitable platform like
Can you please
processing?
repeat? Your background has some noise. I think your voice is not very clear to me.
So,
Repeat it.
Sunny, I want to ask one thing. So, have you opened this link at two places? Because echo is coming. I don't know. I checked again also from my side.
I'll mute it. Maybe you can confirm whether the echo is from my. I'll mute my voice
Yes.
now.
Yes, Manali, you can continue your
Yes,
question.
sir. So, sir, I wanted to ask that, like, when we are deploying any model, be it a machine learning model or a deep learning model to some hardware platform, so how to choose a suitable platform according to our application, like which processing unit we should choose.
Yeah, I think this we are also working on this from a couple of times. So there are different tables actually, and as you also said, like depending on application, how do we choose the hardware itself? How do we deploy that hardware? Realize is that there are actually there are two directions to it. If the end is to get software, or if the end goal is the hardware. If the end goal is the software, so we have to convert all our deep learning models. So all our Python script C has to be converted into C++. All our PyTorch or TensorFlow script has to be converted into that and to a language which can be easily integrated with C++. In our case, we use Torch script. I don't know if you have heard about it. We have to convert Torch script.
Okay, sir.
Torch script, if you can convert, so it's easy. First time of course it's little tougher, but the way it works, you convert all your PyTorch script to a Torch script level, and that Torch platform language is easily integrated to C++. And then you make a package and deploy it. Okay. Now comes the direction, hardware level. It depends on the application. Now we are working on one project where I think I can tell you about the project. So project is about there's a conveyor belt, as you see in the supermarket, right? There's a conveyor belt, and the guy needs to scan the barcode, and then he gets something bill on screen. So you see all this process in a supermarket, right? The project what we have right now. What about if there's no guy who does this scanning? Can we throw a camera based like camera took the picture and then does the scanning and you get a bill, so there'll be human effort in it. So basically there's a who will does that, and now what we need to come up with, we need to detect. So the camera, there are a lot of objects, maybe they are congested as well, one object line on top of each other. We have a prior information that whether this object is an apple or mango. So with pictures we can detect different objects, right? And we have that we can actually with our training data, so we can have like what would be bill or how much is the cost of that, and you get that bill. But we have to deploy everything in a robot now. So we have to deploy our algorithm in a hardware, and sometimes people mainly use Jetson. I don't know if you have heard about Jetson. It comes from NVIDIA, I think. You can deploy. So you can't deploy an expensive or computationally expensive models, but small models can be deployed on Jetsons, and these Jetsons are used, I think, in most of the hardware robotics. So all those robots actually have these Jetsons installed in it, and you can then play with Jetson in order to have a real-time deep learning performance.
Yes, sir. If we are using many parameters in the layers of a model, so the model is not deploying it to small microcontrollers.
So deep learning models. Please repeat it again. I think it was a problem.
You have to mute actually. Echo is coming from your side. I think you're opened, yeah, two places here.
Okay, sir. So I wanted to ask that, if we are having many parameters in the layers of a deep network, so in that case, the model, if we want to deploy it to us, some microcontroller or some other processing unit, so that fails actually. It does not work on those platforms. So that means that we can only deploy small models uh, with few parameters.
Yeah, right.
Does that mean?
So I think you're right in some sense, because I think in Jetson you can't deploy a very high computationally expensive models. But I think the models that we deployed still were in numbers, so that were already quite high in numbers, and we were actually successfully was able to deploy it in our hardware, especially on Jetson. So maybe I think I don't know the error, what error you got. At least for small models, you can definitely do it That's for sure. For higher model, you need to get how much memory it's consuming and so on.
Yes, sir. Okay, okay, sir.
And regarding this parameter, I think the parameter should be an issue because this weights actually has in thousands at least, if
So like
not
the
10,000 or
okay, okay, sir.
So Jetsons, you told,
maybe.
what is the cost of that?
I think it's not expensive. Jetson probably cost around 100 euro or 40, 50,000. I'll just search it. Yeah, found in Germany. So they are from 1 euro in 1,000 to 5,000, 50,000 INR.
Okay.
A lot of jets. Actually.
I think if there are any questions from other participants, they can ask. You have to unmute.
Now,
Yes.
yeah, I mean, you can ask any question related to just not on medical imaging or anything about if you're interested, how do you want to come to Germany or anything related to that. We have a good collaboration with university as well, where we try to hire students for in our lab, and we actually work on diverse topics. So it's just topics. Good collaboration with Max Planck Institute. So basically, our company came from this Max Planck Institute of Informatics. Especially in my lab, so the team that I'm leading, I try to keep a good balance between industry and R&D research, so that we achieve what we want to achieve at the end. So basically satisfy customer as well as enjoy the process that you do basically in a university, write research papers, patents. We write less research paper, we write a lot of patents. Office, something every company does that. But we also try to publish some from time to time in case we feel like we can't provide everything from scratch in the public domain because it really has to be protected. But we try to get some information and publish.
So I think there are no further questions. Thank you for this session. So I request all other participants to turn on the video so we can take a screenshot. Yeah, participants, please turn on the video. Yes, I can take a screenshot.
I think there's a question. I think Dr. From Sudharman. Can you tell us about a postdoc opportunity biomedical signal processing? Yeah, I think in Germany. Can I briefly tell him about what we can apply for, Dr. Udit?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, we
So
are.
in Germany, mainly PhDs and postdocs are considered as a full-time employee. So they are given. So they are not in Germany. They are full-time employee. They get all the benefits that a full-time employee. Yeah. So regarding postdoc opportunities, I think there are a lot of postdoc opportunities in Germany, especially what they, look students from, especially from India. Why would so? Because in Germany, there's a when people once they enter into PhD student life or postdoc, they feel like we are already a student. We are working for a company, not for a university. And what I have realized after talking to many professors that from India and China, the people who come here for PhDs or postdoc, they're ready to put more effort than a normal guy would put it in Germany. And that's why I think, as far as opportunities are concerned, there are many opportunities in Germany. Especially in the last few years, they tried, open a special category for that, something called Blue Card visa. I think you all have heard about Green Card, right? In US, you always hear about from your friends or colleagues that we are applying for Green Card or we have applied for Green Card, but it's refused now. In Germany or in Europe, there's something called Blue Card, which you get only for PhD students can get it postdoc students definitely get it because they are above PhD now, and with the advantage of, so they have this category so that they can attract students from especially India, China, so Indonesia, Vietnamese. The advantage is that in 2 years you get a permanent residency in Germany, and that's why they have this special category where they, people can apply for postdoc. You simply need to look at universities, just look at the university professors, try to see that if you have satisfied the requirements. So the requirements are very simple here. That you should have at least good grades, and then if you are applying for on any topic, like if you're applying biomedical, you should have such papers that just that you are capable for this post or for the postdoc position. And then it's important as well, they take into consideration is letter of recommendation from your professor. They take it very seriously. Your grades, publication, letter of recommendation. So they'll read everything very seriously. And I think if everything works well, then you'll get an offer, at least an interview call from there.
Okay, thank you. Please turn on the video so I can take a screenshot.
I think I should also, my video already on.
Yes,
I was not aware of. Okay.
Yes, some more participants, please turn on the video.
Yeah, how many participants?
54 participants are there, but hardly 7-8 participants are there.
I think all unmuted and there's no cricket match going around, so maybe they are watching PSL match.
Yes, please turn on the video. At least for a few seconds, we can turn on. It's better. Okay, thank you all the participants and Dr. Sunil for this exciting session. So the session was very informative regarding the implementation part. So how can we implement different deep learning and general signal processing algorithms on the hardware? So thank you all the participants. We will meet tomorrow for the next session, and please fill the attendance and feedback form. So if you have any questions from me regarding the FDP, or if you want to give any feedback, you can surely give.
And Dr. Satija for organizing this workshop and this session. I think especially all the students must have thoroughly enjoyed all the session. Finally, my take seminar workshop is that if I have to summarize the workshop in one line, what is that? So which I think Dr. Satija has already summarized, that you can formulate any problem from both signal processing and deep learning. And so this is the takeaway from this. I would say, like, the takeaway from my session would be that if you see any problem, you just signal processing, just think for a while and you can model it in learning as well. So if you're a PhD student, if you're looking for research papers, it's an easy go. Try to see how this problem is related. Now try to reformulate it in a deep learning model. Or if you're a master student, look at master thesis, just look at some good topic that you think is exciting and try to model it. This would be the takeaway from my session, I would say. And I hope you enjoyed it. Okay, thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, bye-bye. Have a good day and a good weekend.
Bye, sir. Thank you very much.